Hi, and welcome to this installment of Frank and Mary here in Westborough. If you haven't seen this show before, you know my name is Art Bergeron. My day job is as an elder law attorney at Myrick O'Connell, actually right here in Westborough. But this is not about my day job. It's about my friends Frank and Mary, whom you've probably seen if you've seen any of my presentations at the local library or senior center. Basically, it's very simple. Frank and Mary's goal in life is to live in their house until they die and be buried in the backyard. And if you're like them, and you can identify with them, then you may want to see this show, because the goal of the show is to allow you, like Frank and Mary, to know the programs you need to know about and the people you need to know about if you want to stay right here in Westborough for the rest of your life. So my co-host, Shelby Marshall, like everybody knows, and she's the person who inevitably finds these great guests. You know, I don't know how she does it. I think they all come to her selectmen's meetings. I don't know how she meets them all to talk about a whole variety of issues that might be of interest to you. We had this guest back before, but I was telling him his reviews were so good that we decided to bring him back again. So Shelby, whom do we have today?
Yeah, well, good morning, Arthur. Always great to see you. Welcome to our guest out in Viewerland. And I'm so excited that we have Sharad Mehta back today to be our guest. He previously spoke to us about our a plastics recycling initiative going on here in Westborough. And Sharad and I share a common bond through the Rotary Club of Westborough. And Sharad has offered to do some presentations on Frank and Mary about the environment and kind of what we need to know. And this is the first of one of those series, first of the series, excuse me. And so because he's got lots to share with us, I'm going to welcome him and have him share his screen, because I know we have a presentation that he's going to walk us through.
Great. Thank you, Shelby. And good morning, Arthur.
Welcome back. Welcome back.
Thank you. So I am going to share my screen. All right, I'll just get started right away. So this is the environment series. This is part 1 of 4. I will go through this topic of climate change and greenhouse gases today. And toward the end, I'll explain what the rest of the parts are about. So just as a disclaimer, this is provided as a social service. I am not representing any organization or enterprise. This is strictly a volunteered presentation. Now, we've all heard about terms like climate change, global warming, and so on. And they all allude to, bad things happening in the near future, like rising sea levels and heat waves and droughts and so on and so forth. And then you get this kicker, which says if the temperature of the Earth goes up by more than 1.5 degrees C, basically the sky is going to fall. And all sorts of bad things will happen. And I'm hearing all this and looking at this and saying, we live in New England and temperature changes by 1.5 degrees in 1.5 minutes here. So what is this? And someone from the science class will admonish that, climate is not the same as weather, and you're conflating between the two. And I don't like the word conflate. So I decided to dig a little deeper, and in the next few minutes, I would like to share my understanding of the environmental issue. So what's really happening is we live on this planet Earth, and almost all of our energy comes from the sun through radiation from space. And we receive energy from the sun, and it's constantly being showered upon the Earth. And we have a stable conditions on the Earth, which means because as in physics, energy cannot be created or destroyed. If you're getting energy in, there must be a way the energy is going out. And somehow this balance is being maintained, which is why we are able to live on this planet Earth. And someone or scientists actually did like a bookkeeping exercise. And this is a nice little chart that shows it. So we get most, if not all of our sun energy from the from the sun. And this is where it goes. So let's say about 30% of it gets reflected right back from the atmosphere. And some of it gets absorbed in other places. And about half of it reaches the land and the oceans. And it gets absorbed, and then it gets transmitted back out. So how does that happen? Well, the Earth has, if you've seen pictures of the Earth from the moon and such, there is this glow. And as a matter of fact, most of this radiation going out happens in the infrared, which we can't see. But it is happening, and the proof of that is we're all sitting here in a relatively safe, stable place. So the energy is being balanced. Now, off late, in the last 50, 70 years, there is a change in this balance that has existed for the last, millions of years. And the change is that the temperature of the Earth is slowly rising. When I say temperature, I mean the average temperature of the Earth, which means that somehow we're still getting the same amount of energy that we used to get, but the amount of energy that's going out is less. And so the Earth is storing some of the energy, as a result of which the temperature is going up. Now, scientists looked at what was causing this. And one of the suspicions was that the amount of carbon dioxide is the temperature rise associated with the carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere globally. Now, this is an interesting chart of the historical data. What it shows is for the last 400,000 years, the red line here shows the variation in carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere. And it goes up and down and more or less balances on an average. But interestingly, the upper orange line actually shows the temperature variation, the average temperature variation during the same time. And you see that they are, the two lines are tracking each other, which means that as the carbon dioxide concentration goes up, the temperature also rises. And when it goes down, the temperature also falls. Now, as I said earlier, in the last 50, 70 years, there is a trend where we are noticing that the amount of carbon dioxide is increasing at an alarmingly rapid pace, which means that if all this is true, the temperature of the Earth is also likely to rise at a very rapid scale. So
What's
why?
interesting, Sharad, if I may just,
Sure.
what's interesting is it looks that like the percent of rise in CO2 is inflated when you look at it from a comparison in the temperature. So when you look at sort of the peaks,
Yes,
you get a much greater temperature rise than you do relative to the CO2 levels, which
that's a great point.
it
Right.
makes it even more concerning. Yeah.
Right, because carbon dioxide is very good at absorbing energy from the sun, and it absorbs the energy and its temperature rises, and that's what causes this larger change in the temperature. So that's a really good observation. Thank you, Shelby. So now what this is showing, this is another chart. What it's showing is the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, emitted in the atmosphere from 1750 onwards on to recent times. And you can see that it was a really small number until we reach the 1900s. This is when automobiles started to run. And around 1950, it was rising slowly. And you can see that as the number of cars and vehicles started to grow worldwide, this carbon dioxide emission basically skyrocketed. And that corresponds to this portion of the rise in carbon dioxide concentration. So now, why do we worry about this? Well, so if the temperature is rising, what could happen? This is it. This is really showing the permafrost. The effect of rising temperature on the permafrost is what the concern is, and I'm going to explain that in this chart. So suppose you were. This is on my left. You see a picture of the globe of the Earth, and let's say you were sitting on a satellite and you were stationed right above the North Pole and looking down. And this is what the Earth would look like as a map. And you would see portions of Canada, portions of Russia, and this purple area here is actually the region. It's a pretty large land area, and it's called the permafrost region. And it's called by that name because this area of land is permanently frozen, and it has a large amount of carbon dioxide stored in it. This is from the over millions of years. The vegetation and the animals that lived there died, and then their bodies decayed and sent off carbon dioxide, which actually was trapped in this frosted permafrost area. Now, the concern is that as the temperature starts to rise, and during the summer, the temperature could rise enough that this permafrost would start to melt. And if that happens, this carbon dioxide that is trapped in this landmass would actually start to release itself. And once that happens, the amount of carbon dioxide that would be released would be much, much more than the fossil fuel carbon dioxide that we produce. Now, this would set off a chain reaction. What would happen is the carbon dioxide would absorb more heat from the sun, and the temperature of the atmosphere would rise, and that would melt more of the permafrost. And so we would have this cycle take off, and that would be now impossible to control. And whether at that point we stop using fossil fuels or not, it wouldn't matter, because we have set off a chain reaction which is now not possible to stop. So now, and there is this, you will hear things like the 1.5 degrees temperature rise and the year 2050 as a tipping point. So what that's about is that by the year 2050, if we stay on the course that we are on right now and don't change anything, the temperature would rise to the point where this chain reaction would start. And so the world over, what human beings are really trying to do is to prevent this from happening, and a lot of activities are going on worldwide to be able to address this issue. So that's the problem that is the tipping point.
That emoji is exactly how I'm feeling during the presentation.
I was going to say, so is there a happy ending coming here? I'm not seeing a happy ending. This is sad.
Stay tuned, Arthur.
Right.
And it comes right back to us. So.
Well, it's fascinating when you look at that timeline in the countries and you think about, the things that we take pride in, right? Industrialization and innovation and globalization and all the other Asians, right? You look at this and you go, we've been our own worst enemy. And so how do we continue to have all of those Asians without, but yet stopping the thaw, stopping or whatever we're contributing
Right,
so that we don't get to the tipping point.
right. All right, so let me go on. So what's happening is just a little bit of why are we concerned about the rise in temperature? Now, as we know, we get rain from the clouds, and the clouds are formed in the oceans, and they lift the moisture, and winds drive the clouds to land, and they drop the moisture off, and that becomes rain. Now, as the temperature rises, remember 3/4 of the Earth is covered in water, so a lot more moisture will be lifted up from the oceans and brought to land, and so we will see increase in flooding and changes in wind patterns, which would cause more hurricanes. And so that's as far as what's happening in the oceans and the water bodies. Now, what about deserts? Well, deserts are already dry. So as the temperature rises, they will lose more moisture than they already do. And so that's going to lead to droughts and forest fires. And we already see effects of these. So in both areas, we stand to lose at the rise of temperature. And because it's on such a large scale, small change of temperature has a really big effect. So we will be seeing the other piece that I do want to mention is that this chain reaction that we had just looked at earlier, what it causes is an instability. So the weather conditions, the cold will become colder, or hot will become hotter, and it'll keep increasing the range of it. The highs and the lows will keep increasing from year to year or time to time. And so that's what is typically called an unstable condition. And that's the other phenomenon that we are afraid of. So now we've all seen pictures like this on TV and such. There's flooding where there's cities and populations settled. There's the hurricanes. We've seen Katrina, and we've seen Puerto Rico's disaster. And we've seen forest fires. This summer we saw in California. This was all, it's a few millions of acres, and they were much more than last year's or the year before. And the devastation is larger. And so it seems like, we're on that trend. And this is a drought scene. So obviously there's a dam here, so there must be a water catchment area here where there's no water. So this in my as is an eye catcher for me for representing a drought. So these are the scenarios that would result as the temperature rises that we're all concerned about. So now comes Arthur's question on what can we do. And I'm going to take just a couple of slides to describe that. Well, first we look at what are the sources of the greenhouse gas emissions. And this is for US as a whole. And broadly speaking, a third of the greenhouse gases come from transportation, from the vehicles we drive, the trucks and the cars and such. About 28% comes from electricity generation. This is the natural gas and oil and coal and all these other sources. And the rest of it comes from these other sources. Now, we did an analysis as part of our Climate Action Plan task force that I'm a member of. And we looked at what are the greenhouse gas sources in the town of Westborough. And Westborough produces about 250,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide per year. And it's broadly, there are three major sources of these CO2 emissions. One is transportation. That accounts for about a third of it. The second is building heating. This is the oil furnaces and all of the wood pellets and all these other sources, fossil fuels that we use to heat our homes. These are all sort of essential needs. They're not luxury items. And then we have electricity, where the electricity, as I mentioned, is produced by a lot of it is produced by burning fossil fuels. So if we take these three sectors, it actually accounts for 83% of the total greenhouse gas emissions that are produced in our town.
And Sharad, is this just so we're all clear, is this both residential and commercial?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
This is for the total.
Yep, okay, thanks.
This is for the total. Yes. So now we come to Arthur's question. We understand all this. So what can we do? And so the point I'm going to make here is that there are technologies and solutions at an economical scale that exist today that we can apply to address these issues. And it would be a good time for us to take a look at these technologies and the economics and understand it. So when we get a chance to switch, for example, if we're changing our vehicle or we're changing our heating system and so on, we can actually take an informed decision and make the switch to be able to address this, because it really has to be done on a individual by individual, family by family, small business by small business, and grow on to a global scale. So the technologies that exist, so for transportation, there are electric vehicles that are available. And I am going to give one part of my series here is about electric vehicles. And we're going to look into the technology and the economics of it and see where and how it would make sense for an individual or a household to be able to make the switch. The second is electricity. And here, one option that's available to us is the solar panels on rooftops. So wherever possible, we will look at the technology of the solar panels and the economics of it. And so, but remember, solar panels are not the only choice. We also have the clean power choice that's offered by the town. And it has various levels. And we can look at the relative costs of the higher renewable energy content. So whether it's 40% or 80%, and how much is the change in cost if we go with the higher ones versus the lower ones, and does it make economical sense for us to make the switch? And then lastly, as far as heating is concerned, there are these things called heat pumps, which are very efficient new pieces of technology that can replace fossil fuels. And if we are able to make these three transitions to these three technologies, then we will be able to get up to 85% of the greenhouse gases emitted within our town itself. And of course, we are typical of similar towns around us. And so similar principles would apply there as well. And so if all of us do this on a very careful, organized way, then we can actually have an effect on the reduction of greenhouse gases and protecting the environment going forward.
That's terrific.
And
That's just terrific. I'm
So-
sorry.
Go ahead.
I just wanted, this is where I wanted to end. I really like this quote. It says, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. And so it's our responsibility to take care of it in a responsible way. And of course, when we give it to our children would have borrowed it from their children. So they will have to take care of it in their own time when they take important decisions like these. And so the process would go on from generation to generation.
This is just terrific. And I know, once again, as you know, Sharad, one of my jobs here is to be timekeeper. So I'm kind of watching the time and saying we're a little close. But I think the notion of really having this looked at the community level,
Right.
which is what makes it so much fun.
Right.
Because they're not individual decisions. If you're doing it as the community's really committed to it, you really are making a huge difference. Huge.
Right.
Well,
But every family has to decide for themselves. So it is a financial choice that has to be made and carefully considered. So
Yes.
the information is important.
And I do want to point out that I think it can feel certainly like a little bit of a doomsday start to the conversation, but I appreciate, Sharad, that you brought forward a couple things. One is there is a climate action plan being developed. It's almost ready for sort of prime time and being presented to the town as to what the next 30 years will look like here in Westborough. How do we address these things, not only from a town perspective on the municipal level, but the changes that we can make that would influence both residential and commercial behaviors, if you will, and purchases. So very excited to see that coming forward. There are a lot of other things already in place, right? Westborough Power Choice, Sharad already mentioned. So you can make a choice or at least you can understand the cost of making the choice for 100% clean local energy right now. And there's a calculator online through our website. Again, our friend Aiden will put up the slide screen that says if you have any questions. Sharad's email was also on here, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to show you how to navigate to that website. So we've got a lot going on our town meeting warrant, and those are proposed to be hybrid vehicles. So we need to keep pressing and insisting upon those type of purchases because it makes good financial sense, and it makes we don't have any of this. None of this kind of matters if we're dealing with famine and flooding and everything else. So we've got to, now is the time. We can't wait.
Right.
That's a great summary. Now is the time. We can't wait, but we are going to have to wait the next show so we can talk a little bit more about what we can do. It's great that you're going to be on, Sharad. This will be a lot of fun. I know Shelby was all excited when she talked about really doing this as a series. And once again, I think, by the end of this, you're going to be ready to run for selectman. I mean, you're going to have some name recognition here. It's going to be terrific. So thank you very much, Sharad, for coming on. Shelby, thanks for suggesting this series. Folks, I hope you enjoyed this. The doomsday is not, and once again, we're doing this for our kids and our grandchildren, right? We're going to be dead before this doomsday, but they're going to be around to try to have to deal with it, right? So thank you very much for watching. We will look forward to seeing you on the next installment of Frank and Mary here in Westborough. And next month, we'll invite Sharad back for his next installment. Thank you very much.